This is being recorded for Liberty University History 701 Historical Professions. Hello, fellow graduate students. This is Robert DeGaramore checking in. This week, the assignment was to look at ProQuest historical newspaper articles. I had two things I wanted to accomplish this week. The first was my project seems to be ever expanding, and I needed to nip that in the bud. So this week I went this way and decided to get it down to maybe one specific chapter that I would utilize in, say, a dissertation. The idea that I wanted to look at this week was called The Crime of 1873. Pretty interesting in American coinage history. And the reason for that, this goes as an argument in 1873 was some legislation that was passed concerning our currencies and species within the United States. They were having some problems with the bimetallism, how much silver should be a relationship with gold, should be backed with the paper money, should be backed with gold or silver, and the ratios and the like. I found three really good articles. All three of them are actually probably editorial articles written trying to persuade the audience or influence them or pretty much show, what their specific interests are in what they call the crime of 1873. So it's a hindsight thing, but these are articles that are written as persuasive pieces to um, tell you what their thoughts are concerning the proposed equalities and inequalities associated with bimetallism of our currency. One article was found in New York Times, one was found in the Washington Post, and the other one the Sun. So they're fairly big league newspapers in the United States. All of them are written in 1873. The first one was it's just a generic editorial piece written. It's a published letter that a judge from the state of Texas had written to the Sherman, who was the Treasury of the United States at that time, who's pushing for the influence of how this should be worked. Anyway, the gist of the article is that Texas thinks this way, supposedly, and he's pretty much representing the whole state as well. He's a judge up in East Texas, and he's basically saying, in our little universe, this is what we think you should do. Who he's writing the letter to is a guy by the name of John Sherman, who's another one of these really interesting people in American history, a real mover and a shaker. He is the younger brother of William Tecumseh Sherman. You might be familiar with him as a superhero from the Civil War. Anyway, the younger brother has actually a more distinguished dossier than his older brother did. It's just a little more hidden because it's a little more political on his agenda. He was sworn in as a senator, and what happened? Wasn't even elected. He was sworn in because the person that he preceded or postceded had passed away in office, and so he's a government appointee. And he goes on to be an advisor to several presidents. So he basically gave up his senatorial seat to work on in the administrative offices, and then went back to being a senator. And then he wrote things like the anti basically the Sherman Act, which is anti-monopoly legislation for the United States a little later in history. So he was a very influential individual. The second article is a letter, actually, Mr. Sherman, John Sherman, is justifying his position on silver and the relationships of the silver. And the third article would be just kind of a populist perspective on that. It says, and the point here is why it was considered the crime of 1873. The premise of the article here is saying how this is going to fit into the populist movement and how the farmers are getting basically bent over because of this new legislation that's being debated. And it was a very contentious debates from what I understand, because I've been reading the notes as far as basically who's saying what about this situation, and is it a crime, is it not a crime, who's going to be the person that picks up the cross on this, and this ultimately leads into the populist movement. I hope you all have a great week. Thank you.